Welcome, everybody, today to the Open Table. We're going to be discussing philosophy for everyday living, where mind, meaning, and mental health meet. This is the beginning of a new series, Philosophy for Everyday Living. Now, when most people hear the word philosophy, they think ivory towers, professors arguing in footnotes, or ancient Greeks in robes. Ludwig Wittgenstein said that philosophy is not a theory, but is an activity. That's what we'll be talking about tonight. So here's the truth. You already have a philosophy. The only question is whether you've examined it. Every time you argue about politics, wonder why suffering happens, decide what's right or wrong, talk about your truth, say that's just common sense, you're doing philosophy. Today, I want to show why this matters practically, psychologically, and culturally. So, before we ever start a history of philosophy, I want to discuss this. Philosophy simply asks unavoidable questions. We have first, what is real? Second, what can we know? Third, what is good? And fourthly, how should we live together? Now, again, these are unavoidable questions. These are everyday real questions that we all tackle. You may never have read Plato, but if you believe there are universal human rights, you've inherited something from Plato. You may have never read John Locke, but if you believe in individual freedom and liberty, you're downstream from his thought. You may have never read Immanuel Kant, but if you believe reason structures morality, you're in this world. We're intellectual descendants, whether we realize it or not. And when we don't examine our inherited framework, we mistake it for reality itself. Now, let's bring this home. As someone working in counseling and psychology, I can tell you something very important here. Your philosophical assumptions become your psychological structure. If you believe that the world is chaos, your anxiety increases. If you believe you have no agency, then your depression deepens. If you believe that humans are basically enemies of one another, your paranoia can grow. Life has no meaning. If you believe life ultimately has no meaning, then despair can creep in. So these aren't just merely emotional states. These are metaphysical commitments embedded in your cognition. In clinical language, we say that your worldview, basically your core beliefs that affect your emotional responses that ultimately lead to your behavior. So philosophy is upstream from mental health. When people say, I don't care about philosophy, what they often mean is, I haven't examined the assumptions driving my emotional life. Look at our current climate. Politics today often operates as a dialectical battlefield, pitting one person against another. So basically, we're saying that my side is humanity, that, my side is moral, your side is a threat. We don't just have disagreements. You're an enemy, you're a threat if you don't think like I do. Complexity is seen as weakness because we would rather have certainty, simplicity and certainty rather than complexity or nuance, because nuance seems like a betrayal because it's not so certain, it's not so clear. But we all know that life is complicated and every decision we make in life isn't so clear or concrete. That's why this type of thinking is philosophically shallow. Max Weber described politics as the tension of competing value spheres. It's not the elimination of an enemy. You're trying to work out different values. Aristotle understood conflict as a normal part of reality, as a normal part of life, not some metaphysical warfare where we're having to launch missiles at each other if we have a misunderstanding or a disagreement. But modern media and social media, especially, rewards escalation. So, in this model, you're not rewarded for making some sort of compromise or some kind of agreement to just disagree. We often just escalate our disagreements into violence. Philosophical illiteracy makes manipulation easy. When you don't know what assumptions are embedded in a claim, what category error is being made, what value hierarchy is assumed, you are governed by rhetoric rather than reason. Philosophy is ultimately a civic self defense. Any good citizen needs to understand how they think and why they think the way they do. Otherwise, the CNNs and the Fox News of the world can pit us against one another and make us dance to their tune. All the social media sites, all the influencers that are out there, they're being paid large sums of money to move people's opinions. They want us to dance to their tune instead of you being a critical, independent thinker that is able to think about complexity and not necessarily have to join a team or take a side. You can think for yourself. Now, let me bring this specifically to our context here in Appalachia, where we know that faith runs deep, loyalty runs deep, history runs deep, and economic insecurity also runs deep. When pressure rises, people cling tighter to inherited frameworks. That's not wrong. It's actually very human. But if we can't examine our frameworks without fear of betrayal, we become fragile. Philosophy does not uproot tradition, it strengthens it by understanding it. If your beliefs are true, they can withstand examination. If they cannot withstand examination, they become anxiety producing rather than stabilizing. And that anxiety often masquerades as anger. One of the great lessons from Socrates was this: I know that I do not know. So philosophy begins with intellectual humility. It doesn't begin with relativism, it doesn't begin with cynicism, but it begins with the humility that there are things that I just do not know, but I'm willing to learn. When we move into the modern era, and thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche, Ludwig Wittgenstein, we encounter the unsettling realization that language shapes reality, perspective shapes interpretation, meaning is mediated. That doesn't destroy truth, but it does make us careful. And careful people tend to be calmer people. But what this series will do, what we aim to do in this series, we're going to talk through the history of philosophy, not as trivia, but as therapy for the culture. Here we'll explore in future episodes, we'll take the Greeks and virtue, episode 1 through this history of philosophy. Episode 2 will be the medieval synthesis. Number 3 will be the Enlightenment autonomy. 4 will be existential anxiety. And finally, we'll wind up in postmodern fragmentation. Now, don't let these words scare you because, again, you're able to understand them if you're willing to learn. This may be new information for you. If it is, good. You'll learn something. You'll learn how to sharpen your mind and have intellectual ammunition in order that you can not be manipulated. But every step of the way of this journey, we're going to ask, what does this mean for how you raise your children, how you vote, how you forgive, how you endure suffering, how you understand God, and how you understand yourself? This will not be a battle between two teams, whether you're right or left, or whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're Baptist or Pentecostal. It's not about battling between teams. It's about taking where you are, putting it on the table, and being able to help you become a better thinker. So let's end with this in our closing time today. Philosophy is not about winning arguments. It's not about owning somebody else. It's about becoming the kind of person who can live thoughtfully in a very complicated world. It teaches, first of all, precision without cruelty. We can help you break through the mud and be able to see clearly why the world functions the way it does. And you can, again, have clarity and precision without being cruel to people that may not be able to see it. Secondly, you can have conviction without fanaticism. You can have, if you're a right thinking person or a left thinking person, you can have your convictions without thinking the other side is an existential threat to all humanity and will destroy everything that's ever been created in all of history. You can have your convictions about the economy. You can have your convictions about whether somebody should get welfare or not. You can have your convictions about whether illegals should be tossed out of the country or whether they should be treated with dignity, or whether we should have a border, whether we should, have some flexibility there. We could do all this without it being so fanatic. But the fanaticism comes from a place of ignorance, rather than a place of humility, because we can have humility without collapsing into anarchy. I was thinking of the great C.S. Lewis. You can see in the quote that I posted here, where humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's just thinking of yourself less. It's the fact that, again, going back to Socrates, there's things I don't know, but just because I don't know it doesn't mean I'm scared or I'm automatically thinking that that's an enemy. Then lastly, if we do this well, the open table becomes a place where disagreement does not mean dehumanization. Again, we can disagree, we can have competing values without dehumanizing one another. You can love Trump or hate Trump. You can love the Clintons or hate them. You can have disagreement on values when it comes to politics without it turning into we have to dehumanize the other. But that comes with the cost of the fact that we have to have humility. Complexity doesn't mean confusion. Complexity is just an acknowledgement and acceptance of the fact that there are things in the world that happen that don't have easy answers. Everything's not an easy answer that's got a black or white, clear answer to it all. That's why it's called complexity, and it's embedded in reality. That's why Aristotle said that conflict is embedded in the human experience. It's not just something to be avoided. Conflict is something that is necessarily a part of being a human. And thinking deeply becomes an act of love rather than it just being some way, again, for you to score points or to just dunk on somebody or to own the libs or to own the right wingers or the MAGAs. Has nothing to do with this. You can be MAGA, you can be left wing, you can be whatever you want to be, but have some ways of thinking about this clearly and deeply as an act of love rather than just being something, again, that turns into some dehumanization. So, next time we begin where the Western philosophical tradition begins in ancient Greece. So, until then, think about this. What assumptions are you living by that you've never examined? That's where philosophy starts. And again, this is where our journey is going. Thank you again. I hope that you have a great week. And until we can meet next time, I hope that your experience in life is one that is with grace and dignity. And let's meet again with an open heart and an open table.